this is actually Barnabas, the larger Barnabas Group. There's a number of chapters. It's its 25th year anniversary this year.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. So as part of that, we wanted to have someone share about a little bit of the Barnabas legacy here and the rich history and legacy. So we have Brian Dowd, and this is a special speaker because Brian helped Larry Means start up the Barnabas Group back in 2010, 11 kind of time frame. And then he went and he birthed the Sacramento Barnabas Group with a team of people. So it's awesome to have Brian here to share. So come on up, Brian.
Thank you, Dan. So this is a real pleasure for me to be here with you. This is just really special. And to see great event, great people, great location, and what I'm pretty sure is going to be like a phenomenal morning of God at work, it's just, it puts a massive smile on my face. And part of that's because I'm pretty sure it puts a massive smile on God's face. So we kind of get to enjoy God's pleasure this morning. So yeah, I'm the managing partner of the Barnabas Group in Sacramento. And every chapter in the Barnabas Group is a little bit different, but we all have the same challenge. And that's trying to describe the Barnabas Group. What is this thing? That's my task. Let me try to explain what the Barnabas Group is here. And I want to do that by sharing a little bit of history. So back in 1995, Bob Buford writes this book, Halftime, and it kind of catalyzed a movement. He was, well-to-do. He had a cable television outlet. I remember when those things were like a thing. Then they multiplied, and he had more wealth than the next several generations needed. But he wrote a book about his transition from success to significance. He said, success is what's measured down here. Significance is what's measured up there. And so he wrote this book, and it caused quite a response that needed more than just a paperback book could answer. So he asked his friend Bob Shank if he would create a program to help successful people go to significance like Bob Buford was able to do. And the result was this thing called the Master's Program. Mark Klopp is here. He calls the Master's Program an executive MBA for kingdom leaders. It's a 3-year program. Some people in this room have gone through it that helps to find and fulfill your kingdom calling. When you're coming from a business background and you want to put into play for the kingdom the things God has given you, relationships and resources, experience and expertise, how do you put that into play for God's fruitfulness, which results in our fulfillment? So the very first class of the Master's Program went through Orange County. It graduated in 1999, and when that happened, they said, okay, we know what we have to offer. We want to engage in what God is doing. We just need some deal flow. Where are those opportunities? And so this is before the TV show Shark Tank, but it kind of was a precursor to that. So the Barnabas Group got created. And so the TV show Shark Tank, if you're familiar with that, you have these entrepreneurs who come in to the sharks to present their business opportunity. And what they're looking for primarily is funding. But every now and then you see a savvy entrepreneur who actually doesn't need the funding. They want something even more valuable. That's the input of the sharks themselves. Because a shout out on social media, advising, introductions they can make, opening up new markets, all kinds of fresh ideas to be the difference maker. And so we took that, or they took the idea from Barnabas. Barnabas was first. But the idea is you get, the Barnabas Group is like Shark Tank, but with a twist. It's not for business, it's for ministries. And the ministries cannot ask for money. Instead, the ministries come and present asking for strategic input. And that's what we get to experience this morning. So let me introduce you to the founders of the Barnabas Group, Bob Shank and Jim West. Bob Shank created the Master's Program, and a little bit about him. If you advance that one, John. Here's a few kind of things that Bob would like to say. Career is what you're paid for. Calling is what you're made for. Win at work, but you don't need to run up the score. The only score that will matter for eternity is measured in lives changed and souls saved. Be as savvy and sophisticated about the work of your calling as you are in your business. You ever notice that discrepancy there? And living out your calling is how to make the rest of your life the best of your life. So this is a little bit of a sense of the master's program. And so the master's program, again, was the precursor to the Barnabas Group. And so if we look at the next slide here, and we see Jim West. So Jim and his wife Susie, started, they ran the Barnabas Group. Jim was called one of the most influential Christian leaders in Orange County. He would say things like, in running the Barnabas Group, if I'm going to err, it will be on the side of being too generous. And I would hear Jim talk. He would tear up talking about his prayers for the ways Barnabas partners experienced God at work. I mean, he would tear up talking about praying for us and doing that. I mean, that's like a heart that, is easy to follow. So I got to be a part of, if we go forward, I got to be a part of the Barnabas Group as a young man. I was about 30 years old when I first got to experience it down in Southern California, and I loved it. It was filled with people who I respected in terms of their professional accomplishments and their Christian faith. Two different categories. In my experience was I normally encountered people who I had great respect for in their Christian faith, but not necessarily their business experience. And the people with their business experience I respected may not have had the same Christian faith, but here was a room full of people with both, and that meant a lot to me, was really formative for me. So I got to invite a few friends, Larry Weeds, my dad Tom Dowd, and a couple others, say, hey, come on down to Southern California and see this stuff. And then do you think we could do it in the Bay Area? And the answer was yes. So I got to teach the master's program, and you see here the first group that did that. You see Dan Menegus in there, you see Mark Pera in there, Larry's in there, Tom Dowd, and then a dashing tie-wearing Mark Klopp. Jeff Lessman was part of that first group as well, just not in the picture. And then out of this group, we started the Barnabas Group right here. So you go to the next slide, and here is the board of the Barnabas Group in the Bay Area. That picture was taken against that wall right there just a few years ago. And so you can see, we had a good 10-year run. The Barnabas Group here in the Bay Area actually became the flagship Barnabas Group. When other chapters wanted to start, they would come here and see how we did it. It was quite an honor, so we got to play that role. We had a fantastic 10-year run of serving almost 100 different ministries during that. Well, why did it end at that point? Well, Larry Weeds had run it for 10 years. He was already putting in extra innings trying to find his exits to be able to do that. We had Plan A. We had Succession Plan A, managing partner that actually didn't stick. We had Succession Plan B, another succession plan that didn't stick. And then in 2020, when right about when COVID came along, it was time for Succession Plan C, and there wasn't one. And so the Barnabas Group didn't return after COVID. That's what happened there. But really, really glad to see it re-emerge. With the leadership of Dan Menegus, John Nolan, Wayne, Cheryl, Jeff. You guys are doing a great, great job. Yeah. This is just awesome. So, I get asked the question, why Barnabas? Why does it even exist? The Barnabas Group does not exist for the ministries. Ministries benefit, that's a key part of what we do, serving ministries, but the Barnabas Group does not exist for the ministries. It exists for the highly capable, deeply committed Christians who want to join God in what God's doing. So if you ever thought about it this way, one of the best ways to experience God is you find where God is at work and you join Him. God's at work at church, no doubt. But God's at work in a different way in the front lines off of the church campus. Where are you going to find those opportunities? That's why the Barnabas Group exists. And for people who like to solve problems, which you tend to find in business, who love to solve problems, hey, give me a problem I can sink my teeth into. It's actually comparable to the kind of problems I like to solve at work that I'm recognized at being good at, that I get rewarded for doing by the marketplace. Give me those kinds of problems. And so what we do here at the Barnabas Group is we have ministries come forth with a big question, a big problem. If they knew the answer to this, it would propel their ministry forward in new ways. And so what you're going to find today is ministries presenting it. And the whole design of the Barnabas Group is to smash the barriers for you joining God. There's a lot of barriers to joining God. Time, money, availability. Where do I begin? And so what you're going to experience here is ministries who have already been vetted. You know God is at work in those places because people have done a lot of due diligence before you ever showed up in the room. They're vetted and ready to go. And then you're given privileged access where they open the kimono for us and say, here's what's really going on. Can you help? If you wanted to have that kind of access anywhere else, it would take a lot of time or money. If you got the money and you're a donor, they say, hey, we're happy to talk to you. They'll tell you whatever you want to know. If you got the time, it probably takes years to get that kind of trust for someone to say, here's what's really going on. Can you help? And in the Barnabas Group, it happens today. You show up and it happens today. So we're eliminating the barriers to get you engaged with what God's able to do. And now here's what's really fun. From the partner perspective, the Barnabas partner perspective, when you say yes to God, and that's what the Barnabas Group is here for, to provide compelling opportunities to engage in what God's doing. It's an invitation. And you don't have to say yes, and the expectation is that you say yes to every ministry, but the hope is at one of these points you'll see, hey, I think God could use me there. And so when you say yes to God and you join God, you experience God. And man, we need that.
Yeah.
So then when you experience God, you know what happens? You're changed by God. And then when you're changed by God, you get this appetite for more. And so it's this virtuous circle. Join God, experience God, changed by God to join God for more. We need that. And most of the people in this room have heard an awful lot of sermons, been to an awful lot of Bible studies, and our growth rate, God continues to grow us and sanctify us and mature us, and that's all good. But when you see God working on the front lines of something pretty special, your growth it's an inflection point. We need that. So people come to the Barnabas Group to find ministry engagement. People stay at the Barnabas Group because of relationships. And if you haven't already sensed it, the people in this room are highly committed, highly capable, deeply committed, and a lot of fun. Barnabas partners like other Barnabas partners, and they end up spending a lot of time together, doing cool stuff. And actually, that's kind of the secret sauce. After you've been around for a while, cool stuff just gets catalyzed, just sparks. And we think the Holy Spirit's a part of that, making that happen. And so we have ministries come twice a quarter, but the really exciting things happen, unrelated to what's on here, and all about what happens around the table, and all about what happens in the relationships that spin out from there. That's like really exciting, really fun. So I want to tell you a little bit about some of the success stories we've seen in Sacramento. So this is Youth for Christ. Shout out to Larry and Esther, where they got their start in Fresno back in the day. Youth for Christ presented in Sacramento just last quarter for us. And Ed Katzmerek came and said, let me tell you about what we've got here. And so if you look at this map on the screen, they say we've got this 12,000 square foot youth center. It's probably worth about $1.7 million. But if you look at where it's at, actually go back one, John, if you look at where it's at, it's like a 10-minute drive away from the nearest school campus. And we think for us to do ministry in this day and age to be more relevant, we need to be closer. So we're looking at some other spaces. If you go forward and you say, they're looking at possibly selling their current property, and buying another one. And so they came to the Barnabas Group with this big question. They said, how can we successfully navigate the challenges of selling one teen center in order to launch one or more centers adjacent to schools, furthering our mission? What they were looking for was market analysis, both in terms of real estate, but also just in terms of where are the centers of influence among high schools in our region. Help us think about that. That's not the normal, here's how you interact with teens skill set Youth for Christ shows up with. And so the Barnabas Group had the ability, had people in the audience who were able to say, hey, let's talk about that. Let's think about that. And not only were they able to think through, hey, how do you sell high and buy low? Simple questions. Not only were they talking about that, but actually had this other kind of breakthrough idea. If you want to get adjacent to high school campuses, are there any church partners out there that might let you use their space or lease their space? And so instead of going from like 1 to 2 or maybe 3, it turns into a 1 to 7 or maybe 10. And that's the kind of business mindset the Barnabas Group was able to bring to Youth for Christ, just like in the last 90 days. That's a good example of the Barnabas Group at work. Now let me tell you about a different example that's kind of a signature story coming out of Sacramento that has meant the world to me. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on this one. This was kind of a big one. So if you go to in 9/11, terrible tragedy that happened. The United States followed Al-Qaeda into Afghanistan and said, we got to track them down and we got to take care of this terrorist threat. As the United States went into Afghanistan and looked at how to do that, so just advance the slide a couple here, John, two of them, the United States had to partner with Afghans on the ground as subcontractors and hired them. And every time there was an Afghan who sided with the United States, they were siding against the Taliban. So after 20 years of this relationship, the United States, without any communicative preparation, withdrew from Afghanistan, saying, don't worry, Afghan government, you'll be fine. But the reality was the Taliban took over in short order. And the Taliban had a vendetta against everyone who sided with the Americans. So you see this evacuation effort. The United States ended up evacuating 73,000 Afghans in about a 30-day period. Not even that, like 2 weeks, I think it was more. And you saw these other Afghans left behind. If you have these horrible images, you might remember people hanging on the airplane wing, thinking that that's a better alternative than staying behind with the Taliban. And so they would be airlifted. And so here's a picture on a cargo plane. Cram as many people as you can in there, and then they would land. The United States didn't know what to do with them, and they were in army bases as they figured out what to do. And then about between 8 and 10,000 of them landed in Sacramento. So if you advance one more, they would arrive and it'd be a situation like this, where you see a family of 6, 7, or 8 in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, in the last apartment anyone would want in Sacramento. So with all of this going on, we would take a look at, I got a phone call, I got an email from my counterpart who leads the Barnabas Group in Kansas City, George Comments. He says, hey, Brian, I got a friend in San Francisco you need to talk to. Okay, if he says talk to him, okay. And this was, go back one slide, John. I'm sorry, go forward, my bad. And so he put me in touch. He says, hey, I got a friend who's doing ministry in Fremont, which is the city with the most Afghans of anywhere in America, Fremont, California. And his name's Kavan. So I'm talking to Kavan, and Kavan says, all these Afghans come to Fremont, but then they end up going to Sacramento because Sacramento County has more Afghans than any county in America. And Brian, you got to do something to take care of them. Wow. And I shrugged my shoulders, and Sure. Hey, sure. Well, here's what we were able to do. We hosted a lunch with 3 or 4 of the ministries we knew that had served refugees. And we said, is there anything we can do that needs to be done? And the result was, fast forward one year, John, we came with a vision, stabilize 200 families by the end of 2023 with a strategy to hire a staff of Farsi-speaking Christians from Iran to do the work. We hired a team of 4. They were basically missionaries to Afghans who had arrived. By the way, Afghanistan at the time this happened was the #1 country that was hardest to reach with the least amount of religious freedom in the whole wide world. If you want to talk about unreached people group, they were top of the list of hardest, and there's virtually no Afghan Christians. There are some, but not really. So keep going, John. What the Barnabas Group did, this wouldn't have happened without the Barnabas Group. So the Barnabas Group provided the executive team leadership. A lot of the people who supported and sponsored what was going on, resources like you wouldn't believe in terms of jobs, furniture delivery, stuff like that. Keep going, John. That's my family. My family got to sit down and have tea with Afghans. Actually, you want to talk about joining God and experiencing God, try doing it as a family. Next level stuff. Go forward, John. Accomplishments. Our goal was to stabilize 200 families. 3,038 individuals got served, and 545 families got served, with almost 1,200 receiving medical care going forward. So, anyways, the upshot of all of this, one more, John, is this church that was formed. And so this was just 2 Sundays ago. A close look sees the back of Jeff Lessman's head. He was there for it. 2 Sundays ago, this church of 30, about 15 Afghans, 15 Persians that make up this Farsi-speaking church. And I don't have any authority on which to say this, but it just might be the largest Afghan church in the world. Because we don't know of any others. So pretty extraordinary. It wouldn't have happened if not for the Barnabas Group. And this is an out-of-the-box crisis response, rapid motion kind of thing that happened. And this service represented the conclusion of NorCal Refuge Crisis Response. We're done. The ministry is going to continue, but the crisis is over, and we're really happy about that. So this is a signature story of how Barnabas feel really, really good about how God works among and through people like you and me in an environment like this. So how does that happen? If we go forward and take a look at the process for what to expect this morning, our process for the Barnabas Group is it starts with a ministry introduction. And so there's a number of ministries in town or in the region, and so getting connected with them. And then there's a selection process. There's an application that goes through that. We're looking for organizations that are going to be most engageable for our partners. And then there's a preparation process where you review, you try to say, what's the big question? What's the key outcomes that we're trying to get? How do you present in a way to do that in terms of the presentation gets reviewed, after the application gets reviewed, then there's a rehearsal that happens. I mean, there's actually, there's a lot of work that happens before we get here this morning. Then you see the quarterly event. That's today, and then following today, there's the opportunity for 2 tracks. One is just your initiative. Anything you want to do with any ministry you hear about, take action, be proactive, initiate. It's your discretion. Please do so. And by that, it's just, if you get prompted by the Spirit of God, follow. You don't need the structure. But what we try to do is create structure, make it incredibly easy for you. And the way we do that is we hold an ideation session. And so this is about 2 or 3 weeks that's coming up. Where it's a facilitated process to help the ministry think through their big question, find some solutions. And the ministry knows we're not there to say you must do this. We're just trying to offer some ideas that are helpful. The ministry gets to decide on their own. This is a good idea. This is a bad idea. And that's our goal. Then after that, there's the follow through for us to say, hey, we gave some good ideas, or is there an opportunity for you to do more? And it's up to you. And then there's discretionary involvement that goes on as long as you want. Ministries, our hope is that ministries get to foster relationships with us in this room. We can't promise that, we can't dictate that, but we know good relationships happen, and some of them are long-term lasting, and we rejoice over that. So there you go, that's the process of the Barnabas Group, a little bit of the background of the Barnabas Group. Man, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad this group is here. I'm so glad for the team that's making all this happen. And I'm pretty sure God's got a big old smile on his face right now.